She walked through the door every evening wearing the same soft blue scrubs, a tired smile on her face, and the scent of antiseptic lingering on her skin. She looked like a hero, because to everyone else, she had spent 12 hours tending to the wounds of strangers, holding a hand to patients who had no one, comforting scared families in waiting rooms, saving lives that hung on by threads. And I admired her for it, at first, but over time, admiration turned into longing, because the smile she wore for them, the gentle, compassionate, heart-melting smile, slowly disappeared when she looked at me, and that was the first sign I tried to ignore. I remember standing in the kitchen one night, stirring a pot of pasta, waiting for her to walk in. I had lit a candle. Nothing fancy, just something to say, "Hey, I missed you." But when she came in, her eyes were glazed over, already somewhere else. She kissed me on the cheek without even looking, mumbled, "Hey," and disappeared into the shower. No mention of the meal, no question about my day, just a practice motion, a routine. And I told myself, she's tired, she's overwhelmed. She gives so much to others. She has nothing left for me right now. But how many nights in a row can someone be too tired to smile at you, to ask you how you're doing, to remember that love needs more than presence? It needs attention. The next night, I watched her from across the room as she FaceTimed with a patient's mother. Her eyes lit up, her voice lifted. She listened with patience and ended the call with a promise to check on their daughter again tomorrow. Then she turned to me and the light dimmed, as if I was a chore waiting on the counter, as if loving me had become a task she hadn't scheduled time for. I wanted to believe it was the stress, the pandemic, the shifts, the weight of caring for so many others. But there was a point, a specific, undeniable moment, where it stopped feeling like circumstantial distance and started feeling like emotional abandonment. One evening, we sat on the couch. She on her phone, me pretending to watch a movie. I looked over and said quietly, "I miss you." She didn't even look up, just said, "I'm right here." But she wasn't. Not really. Her body was in the room, but her soul, the part of her that once laughed with me, teased me, reached for me, it was elsewhere, with patience, with stories, with everything and everyone except me. And what do you do when the person who once made you feel like the center of their universe now treats you like background noise? You ache silently. You shrink. You pretend you're fine. And worst of all, you start to believe maybe you deserve it. If you've ever laid next to someone who made you feel completely alone, then maybe this story isn't just mine, it's ours. And if that's true, subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard by those who understand. There was a time when our home echoed with warmth, not just in laughter or shared stories, but in the quiet intimacy of two people who genuinely want to be around each other. We used to cook together, even if it meant burning half the meal. We used to dance in the kitchen to songs from our early days, spilling wine and singing off-key. We used to look at each other as if every day together was a privilege, not a routine. But now, silence had taken over, not the peaceful kind, not the comforting quiet that wraps around two souls who know each other deeply. No, this was a cold, heavy kind, the kind of silence that suffocates, that fills the space between two people with unspoken resentment and confusion. It crept in like fog, slow and subtle, until one day I realized we no longer had real conversations. Our words became transactional. Did you feed the dog? I'll be late again tonight. Can you pick up more detergent? These were the sentences that replaced "I love you." This was a language we now spoke. I started to dread her return home. Not because I didn't love her, but because her presence only amplified how absent she truly was. She collapsed on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through photos of patients, messages from colleagues, group chats from work. I wasn't jealous. I was invisible. And worse than feeling unloved was a feeling of being unnecessary. I'd sit across from her during dinner and watch her eyes glaze over, her fork pushing food around the plate. When I spoke, her responses were delayed, distracted. She was somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't follow. Somewhere I was no longer invited. I tried to reach out. I brought up the distance. Gently, cautiously, not wanting to sound accusatory. She nodded, said she was tired, always tired. I asked if she was okay. She said yes, but it felt like she didn't want to go any deeper. And so we stopped trying. We stopped fighting for each other. We stopped noticing the slow disintegration of what used to be a love story. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from betrayal or lies or screaming matches. It comes from quiet neglect, from someone you love slowly deciding they don't have time or space for you anymore. And the worst part? They never say it. They just stop showing up emotionally, day by day, until one morning you wake up and realize you're sharing a life with a stranger. The silence wasn't just in the room. It was in her touch, in her gaze, in the way she no longer asked how my day was, in the way she no longer laughed at my dumb jokes or teased me when I forgot to put the milk back in the fridge. These small things, the things that used to be us, they were gone, replaced by a version of her that gave everything to everyone else and left me with the scraps of what she used to be. I didn't want to accuse her. I didn't want to make her feel guilty. I knew the work she did was important. I knew lives depended on her. But I had forgotten what it felt like to be one of those lives she fought for. I had become the background, the furniture, the silent partner to a woman who now belonged more to the world than to our marriage. And every day, the quiet between us grew louder than any fight ever could. I don't care about algorithms. I care about the people listening to this who are bleeding silently like I did. If you ever held back tears just to protect someone who didn't protect you, subscribe. You don't have to do this alone anymore. It used to be my favorite question. How was your day? 3 simple words that open the door to connection, to laughter, to venting about rude patients or funny coworkers, to all the small moments that made her life outside our home feel like something I was still a part of. It was how I stayed close to her world, even when I couldn't walk beside her in the halls of that hospital. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that question turned into a brick wall. It didn't happen overnight. At first, she'd give short answers. It was busy, the usual, nothing special. I assumed she was just tired, that the weight of caring for others all day was heavy, and that she needed space. But over time, it wasn't just fatigue. It was disinterest. It was deflection. It was her way of saying, don't ask me to open up. I'm already emptied elsewhere. And I obeyed that unspoken message. I stopped asking. But not because I didn't care, because I was tired of feeling the sting of her emotional distance every time I tried to reach in. What hurt the most wasn't her silence. It was knowing that she wasn't always silent. I'd overhear her on the phone with her co-workers, laughing, swapping stories, retelling moments from her shift with energy and details she never shared with me. She still had stories. She just didn't tell them to me anymore. That realization cracked something deep inside me, because it meant the problem wasn't her exhaustion. It was her choice. She had chosen to cut me out of her emotional life. She had decided, whether consciously or not, that I no longer needed to know the intimate parts of her day, of her heart. I became an audience she no longer performed for, and I began to feel like a stranger in my own marriage, sitting across from a woman who once told me everything, now keeping her world guarded behind tired smiles and routine kisses. One night, I tried again. I cooked her favorite dinner, lit a candle, made the effort. She came home late, dropped her bag by the door, and sighed deeply. I asked gently, rough day? She nodded. I pressed a little further. Want to talk about it? She looked at me, eyes tired, and said, there's nothing to say. I'm just tired. Then she walked away. But I knew there was something to say. I could see it in the way her shoulders carried more than physical exhaustion. I could see it in the way she held her phone tighter lately, the way her texts made her smile when she thought I wasn't looking. I could see it in the way her eyes lit up for others, but dimmed when they landed on me. I wasn't just losing her stories. I was losing her heart. The emotional door between us had closed, and every time I knocked, she pretended she didn't hear it. That question, how was your day, became too painful to ask, because the answer was always the same, and the subtext was always clear. You don't get to know anymore. You're not the one I share things with now. And when that became our normal, I realized that something precious had died quietly between us. Something we didn't even try to revive. It was a Tuesday. Nothing extraordinary on the calendar. No birthdays. No anniversaries. Just an ordinary weekday that somehow became unforgettable. I had gotten off work a bit early and decided to surprise her with something simple. A small bouquet of sunflowers, the kind she used to say reminded her of her childhood, and take out from that Thai place she loved before she started skipping dinner altogether. I even cleaned up the living room, lit a candle again, hoping maybe this time tonight would feel like before, but she never came home on time. I waited, texted, "Everything okay?" No response. An hour passed, then another. I knew her shift had ended at 7. By 9:30, I was pacing. At 10, the door opened. She walked in, still in scrubs, laughing at something on her phone. And when she saw the table set, the candle, the flowers, the effort, she froze for a second as if she had walked into the wrong house. "You should have told me," she said flatly. I forced a smile. It was a surprise. She exhaled, clearly annoyed. I stayed after to help a new nurse. Then I grabbed a drink with a few of the girls. I didn't think I needed to check in. That's when it hit me. She didn't even think to let me know. Not because she forgot, but because I wasn't even on the mental list of people she considered when making plans. I wasn't part of her world anymore. I was a leftover from a previous version of her life. I stared at her as she walked past the table, past the candle, past me, straight to the shower. She didn't ask about the flowers. She didn't ask why I looked so still. She didn't see that I was breaking, because she wasn't looking. And it wasn't just about that night. It was a pattern. I'd hear about her coworkers' birthdays, their breakups, their pets, their lives. She showed up for them. She remembered their details. She made time. But with me, everything was last minute. Forgotten. Rushed. Like I was a task she kept postponing. I stopped being a priority and started becoming a convenience. Something she only noticed when I wasn't functioning the way she expected. I had turned into furniture in her life. Something that's always there, always useful, but never looked at closely, never appreciated for its presence. And when you love someone deeply, there is no pain more profound than realizing you've been placed at the bottom of their list, behind strangers, behind colleagues, behind even their silence. That night, I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, alone at a table set for two, staring at wilting sunflowers, wondering when exactly I became invisible in the eyes of the person I built my life around. And in that silence, I knew love doesn't die in explosions. It dies in neglect. It dies in being forgotten. And I had officially been forgotten. It had become a habit, so subtle that I didn't question it at first. Her phone was always face down, on the kitchen counter, on the nightstand, on the couch, always screen down. I told myself it was out of respect, out of habit, maybe even to avoid the constant pings from hospital alerts or group messages. But deep down, a quiet part of me started to wonder if it was something else, a silent signal that there were things I wasn't meant to see. Still, I didn't ask. I didn't want to be the insecure husband, the jealous one, the guy who polices his wife's privacy because he can't handle her independence. So I let it go, again and again, until one night she forgot. It was late. She had fallen asleep on the couch after a double shift, exhausted, hair still tied back in that messy bun she wore under her cap. I covered her with a blanket and picked up her phone to plug it into the charger, something I'd done 100 times before, but this time it was face up, and it lit up in my hand. A message from a name I didn't recognize. Dr. Raphael. The message preview read, "Wish you were here tonight." My heart didn't beat faster. It stopped. For a second that felt like a century. I just stared at it, not breathing, not thinking, just unraveling. The words weren't explicit. Not yet, but they were intimate, familiar. The kind of words you don't send to a colleague at midnight unless there's more beneath the surface. I wanted to wake her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, watching as more messages began to appear. Little gray bubbles of betrayal, one after another. Flirty, casual, deeply personal. He knew things about her day that I didn't. He referenced jokes I'd never heard, memories I wasn't part of, and the worst part? She replied to him in ways I hadn't seen from her in months. With warmth, with attention, with excitement. The way she used to text me when we were first falling in love. That night, I didn't confront her. I walked to the bathroom, shut the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and stared at nothing. Numb. Everything made sense now. The distance, the tiredness, the forgotten dinners, the silence after, "How was your day?" I was no longer her person. He was a man I didn't know, a name I hadn't heard, a presence that had quietly replaced me in the one space I thought was sacred, her heart. And it all started with a phone that used to always face down, until one night it didn't. I never thought I'd find myself in the ICU for anything other than a medical emergency. But life has a cruel sense of irony. It wasn't my heart that was failing. It was hers. Not physically, but emotionally. And the damage, though invisible to machines and monitors, was far more fatal. That morning started like any other. She kissed my forehead, said she loved me, and headed off for another shift. But something in me couldn't settle. Maybe it was the messages I saw. Maybe it was the way she smiled at her phone before walking out. Or maybe I had finally reached the limit of pretending I didn't feel like a ghost in my own home. So I made a choice. I drove to the hospital, told myself it was a surprise, a coffee drop-off, an innocent gesture of affection. That's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew I was chasing a truth I was too afraid to ask for. When I arrived, I waited in the lobby, nervous. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the coffee. A receptionist recognized me. I'd been there before for hospital fundraisers and staff events. She smiled, unaware of the storm beneath my calm exterior. "She's in the ICU today," she said, pointing. "You can head back if you'd like." I walked down that sterile hallway, every step louder than the last. My chest was tight, not from illness but anticipation. Fear, dread. I turned the corner into the ICU, and then I saw her. Not alone. She stood next to a patient's bed, clipboard in hand, and beside her, far too close, was a man. Tall, confident, wearing a lab coat. Dr. Raphael. I knew it was him before anyone introduced us. He laughed at something she said. She placed a hand on his arm, briefly, gently, but with familiarity, intimacy. I stood there unseen and watched the woman I loved exist as if I never did. She smiled in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her eyes lit up. Her body leaned toward him the way it used to lean toward me. And in that moment, it didn't matter that they were wearing badges, that they were at work, that there was no physical betrayal in plain sight, because the emotional betrayal screamed at me. She cared. For him. She cared enough to laugh, to share her day, to be present. Everything she had stopped doing with me, she was giving to him, effortlessly, naturally, completely. I backed away before she saw me, my body trembling, the coffee shaking my hand. I made it outside before I finally let the tears fall. Not because she cheated. I still didn't know that for sure. But because she had given him the version of herself that I had been begging to see again for months. And I knew then. You don't have to sleep with someone to leave your partner feeling abandoned. Sometimes, all it takes is your attention, your smile, your stories, your heart. And hers wasn't mine anymore. That ICU wasn't filled with just patients on the brink of life and death. It was where I witnessed the end of something that used to be sacred, our connection. And from that moment on, everything changed. If this sounds like your life, stop pretending you're fine. Stop hiding it like I did. Subscribe, not for me, but for every person who thought they were crazy until the truth finally shattered them. You're safe here. We see you. I used to replay our wedding vows in my head like a favorite song, not because I was nostalgic, but because I needed to remember that once her promises to me were real. That once she stood in front of me with tears in her eyes and swore that I was her person, her only person. She said words like always, forever, and in sickness and in health, with the kind of conviction that made even the most cynical people believe in love again. And I believed her. God, I believed her. But somewhere between those sacred words and silence that filled our kitchen months later, those vows evaporated. I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was gradual, a slow erosion of affection, chipped away by late shifts and unanswered questions. Or maybe it was sudden, the moment she let another man become her emotional anchor. But either way, the woman who promised me a lifetime had slowly stopped choosing me, not just once, but every single day after. And it wasn't the big things that proved it. It was the small, quiet betrayals. The "I'm just tired" when she wasn't. The phone that never left her hand but never faced me. The way she started to flinch when I touched her shoulder, like affection had become an interruption instead of a comfort. The worst part was that she never ended things. She just stopped showing up. She let our marriage die without ever declaring it dead. And I was left holding the memories like they were evidence in a case that would never go to trial. I tried everything to save us. Date nights, counseling, conversations at 2 a.m. that ended in silence. But no matter how hard I fought, I was alone in the ring. I was loving someone who had already emotionally packed her bags. And maybe she told herself she hadn't done anything wrong, that as long as she wasn't physically cheating, she was still honoring her vows. But love isn't just about not crossing the line. It's about staying close enough that the line never even matters. Her vows became empty words the moment her heart drifted, and she didn't bother to pull it back. The moment she stopped asking how my day was. The moment she started hiding pieces of her life from me. The moment Dr. Raphael knew more about her than I did. And the moment she didn't even notice that I was breaking, that I had stopped sleeping, stopped smiling, stopped feeling like a man in his own home. Love isn't always loud when it dies. Sometimes it slips away in silence, unnoticed by the one who let it go. And standing there, alone in the same house we once dreamed in, I realized her vows weren't broken in one single moment. They were broken in every moment she chose someone else over me, one breath at a time. There was no dramatic ending, no screaming match, no suitcase thrown down the stairs or final door slammed shut. Just a quiet morning. She had just come off a double shift, and I was already up, sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She walked in, tired, barely noticing me. A quick morning and a distracted kiss on the top of my head. The kind you give out of habit, not love. And that was the moment I realized she wouldn't even notice if I disappeared. I had become background noise in my own life. The man she once promised forever to was now just another piece of furniture she passed by. So I gave her the one thing she hadn't given me in months: space. Not out of anger, not to punish her, but because I needed to breathe, to feel again, to remember who I was before I became invisible in my own marriage. I packed a single bag while she slept, left my ring on the counter, and walked out of the house we built together with nothing but silence. No note, no confrontation. Just a quiet exit from a life that no longer felt like mine. She never heard my goodbye, because by then she had already stopped listening. And for a while, I thought that would destroy me. I thought I would break completely without her. But something strange happened in the stillness that followed. I found me, the me who laughed, the me who wrote, the me who sat in a cafe alone and didn't feel like a failure. I started working out again, not for revenge, but for healing. I started calling old friends, rebuilding relationships I had let die, tried to save a marriage that was already buried. I discovered that sometimes the most powerful transformation happens not when someone stays, but when they leave, or when you finally choose to walk away from what's slowly killing you. I never got closure from her. She never came running after me, never sent a message asking where I went, never apologized. And maybe that used to hurt, but not anymore, because I stopped needing her to understand my pain to validate it. I stopped needing her to acknowledge what she took from me to begin rebuilding it. And now, when people ask what happened, why a seemingly perfect couple unraveled, I just smile, because I know the truth. She didn't stop caring because I changed. She stopped caring because she did. And I finally stopped waiting for her to remember who we were and started discovering who I could become without her. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I'm just free. free from pretending, free from hoping someone will come back who already left, free from being a supporting role in a life I thought we were building together. And in that freedom, I found something better than answers. I found peace. You come this far. That means something. You felt this. You lived it. Maybe not this exact story, but your own version of it. So if you're still here, still breathing under the weight of something they'll never apologize for, hit subscribe. Because no one should walk through this kind of betrayal alone. And if no one else says it, I will. I'm glad you're still here.